Hello and welcome. Before we begin, a quick note. In this video, you'll hear me speaking in Azerbaijani, my native language, while the voiceover translation will be in English. I do this to stay true to who I am, while still sharing my thoughts with a global audience. I'm Vali Alibayov, a geopolitical analyst, and today we're diving into a topic that reveals more than meets the eye. The surprising truth behind Russia's isolation plans, why they failed. In the aftermath of the Ukraine war, Russia hoped to turn Western sanctions into a strategic advantage by pivoting east, replacing imports, and building a new world order. But as we'll see, this plan didn't go as expected. Why is this topic important now? Because the world is shifting rapidly, and understanding how and why Russia's attempt at isolation backfired helps us grasp the real power dynamics shaping today's global politics. Stay with me. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the key miscalculations, the geopolitical illusions, and the long-term consequences that are unfolding before our eyes. Let's begin. When the West launched a barrage of sanctions against Russia, following the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, many analysts expected the Kremlin to buckle under the weight of economic and diplomatic isolation. Instead, Moscow responded with a counter-strategy, pivoting to the east and the global south, promoting economic self-sufficiency, and presenting itself as a leader of the multipolar world. But several years into this confrontation, it's becoming clear that Russia's isolation plans, both voluntary and reactive, have failed in more ways than one. One, a miscalculation of global dependence. Russia believed that its vast energy exports, grain supplies, and military-industrial complex would make it too vital to be ignored. Indeed, countries like India, China, and some African nations continued cooperation. But the Kremlin underestimated how quickly Europe would reduce its reliance on Russian gas and oil. In less than 2 years, Germany cut Russian gas imports by over 90%, and the EU reshaped its entire energy infrastructure. The shift was painful, but it happened faster than Moscow expected. 2. The myth of the Eurasian bloc. Moscow envisioned a new geopolitical axis with Beijing at its core. But China's support has remained strategic, calculated, and cautious. Beijing has benefited from discounted Russian oil and a weakened Russia needing Chinese markets, but it has avoided overt military or diplomatic alliances. Russia's hope for a united anti-West bloc has largely failed to materialize beyond rhetoric and opportunistic trade. 3. Overconfidence in import substitution. Russia launched ambitious import substitution programs aimed at replacing Western technology, consumer goods, and industrial parts. However, the reality proved more complicated. Key sectors like aviation, automotive, and microelectronics struggled with supply chain disruptions. Despite parallel imports and sanctions evasion, critical gaps remained. Russian industry became more dependent on Chinese technologies, which are not always compatible or reliable replacements. 4. Isolation as a boomerang. By limiting Western influence, banning independent media, and criminalizing dissent, the Russian government aimed to create a sovereign ideological space. But this isolation accelerated brain drain, capital flight, and internal stagnation. Over 800,000 Russians are estimated to have left the country since the war began, many of them educated, mobile, and skilled professionals. In trying to build a self-contained system, the Kremlin inadvertently weakened its own innovation potential. 5. Soft power collapse. Perhaps the most underestimated failure has been in soft power. Russia once maintained a robust image as a global cultural, scientific, and political player. Today, it is increasingly associated with aggression, censorship, and repression. RT and Sputnik have lost much of their international audience. Cultural diplomacy is minimal, and Russian narratives face widespread skepticism, even in countries that remain politically neutral. Conclusion: a false sense of control. Russia's plan to outmaneuver Western isolation and turn it into a new kind of self-sufficient empire has not succeeded. While Moscow has adapted in some areas, the broader costs, economic, technological, demographic, and reputational, are mounting. The truth is that in trying to isolate itself from the West, Russia became more dependent on fewer partners, more vulnerable to internal decay, and less capable of shaping the global narrative. In the end, the failure was not just strategic, it was philosophical. The belief that a country in the 21st century could thrive in isolation from global institutions, innovation networks, and open exchange was always a myth. And Russia is now paying the price.